The USS Missouri was an Iowa Class Battleship which entered service with the United States Navy in 1944. It played a historic role at the end of the war in Japan as she was used as the location for the signing of the surrender. Nicknamed Mighty Mo by her affectionate crew, she would continue to be upgraded over the years before finally being decommissioned from fleet service in the early 1990s, taking up her final role as a museum ship at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. Hello everyone and welcome back to the workbench. I'm Matt and this is Model Minutes. Today I'm building this rather tiny model of the USS Missouri. It's a little different to my normal build videos as, if I'm honest, there isn't really that much to this kit. But I tried a few different things out on this one compared to the other versions of models in this range, having previously built the USS New Jersey and HMS Hood, which you can also find on my channel. I will pop a list of paints and products that I used during this build on the screen to give you an idea of the kind of thing you might want to get if you fancied giving this a go for yourself. So, without any further ado, join me in this video as I build and review the USS Missouri in 1:2000 scale from the works. There isn't much to this kit. The front of the box has this striking artwork of the ship with some basic information. The back has a bit more information along with the 3 diagrams featuring the building instructions. Not the easiest to follow, but it is possible. Inside the box, the sprues are contained in a little plastic bag. There are 2 grey ones and 1 moulded in red. The moulding is generally quite crisp, with some tiny amounts of flash in a few places. Due to the small scale though, some of the details are merely representations and others are definitely way out of scale. No photo etch parts or decals are included, so more advanced modelers might want to do some scratch building to raise this kit to a higher standard. To start off this build, I snipped the parts from the sprue using my cutters, then cleaned up the rough areas with a sanding stick. The plastic was a little hard, so at times I'd also use my knife to cut the stubborn bits away. I'm going to use this Humbrol liquid poly cement in this build. It is a bit more aggressive than the cements I normally use, which I'm hoping will work better on the harder plastic of this kit. I joined the red hull parts together. They have little moulded locating marks which helps with alignment. They were a little bit warped though and needed holding together until the glue had dried. Next, the upper deck can be added to the hull. I added a bit of glue and then again held it in place until it had bonded. This was a little bit warped as well, but could be overcome by applying some pressure. This part needs gluing on here. I guess with the injection moulding process it couldn't have been done as one part, so I suppose that's why it's separate. The tower had quite a bit of flash, so I carefully removed that using my knife. The halves of the tower can then be glued together, but there are no locating marks, so this is just best effort on the part of the modeler. It could then be added into its slot on the ship. So too is this upper deck part here. There are quite a lot of little gun turrets, and they get added to their holes on the model. A little bit fiddly and time consuming, with the small parts wanting to just fly off when picking them up with the tweezers. Some of the holes on the top deck were partially closed and needed opening up. With that done, some more of the superstructure can be added. There are quite a lot of small parts on this kit, but it does become quite clear where they need to go as you start working through it. The last part I'll add before painting is the crane for recovering the aircraft on the stern of the ship. And speaking of painting, I've got this Revell 331 purple red acrylic paint, which was from a Titanic set many years ago. I thinned it with a little Tamiya acrylic thinner X20A and then carefully brushed it onto the lower hull. I thought the red plastic was a bit too red and this should look a bit better. A few thin coats was needed to get an even finish. Next, Tamiya XF82 Ocean Grey was again thinned and then brushed onto the upper areas of the ship, taking care to avoid the red paint previously applied. Tamiya XF19 Sky Grey was next to be used, this time on the bow of the ship. I did a little bit of looking at images online and there seemed to be a colour difference here, so I replicated it with some tape to keep the colours neat. I then applied this paint to the upper areas of the model as well as the main guns, which were still waiting to be glued on. When that paint was dry, I removed the masking tape and I'm pretty happy with that result. Tamiya XF55 deck tan was thinned and then used on the deck areas, taking care to avoid the vertical parts of the model, which should remain grey. This was another fiddly and time-consuming step. A small amount of Humbrol polycement, this time from a tube, as it is a bit thicker, was applied to the launching rails for the aircraft. They were then glued into place. Revell Matte Blue number 56 was then painted onto these tiny little planes. A bit more polycement was added to the gun mounts, and then the turrets could be pushed into place. Humbrol 32 Dark Grey was brushed onto the display stand. I didn't want it to be too dark and thought that this would be a good choice. Humbrol 29 Dark Earth enamel paint was thinned with some white spirit to make a simple wash, which was then painted onto the model to help give the impression of grime, as well as bringing out some of those details. When that was dry, I repeated the process but with Humbrol 32 acrylic, which was thinned with water this time. This was again applied as a wash to add a bit more contrast. Humbrol No. 1 Primer Grey acrylic was then dry brushed onto the model to bring out the raised details and add a bit more contrast. At the time I made this model, which was around a year ago now, I was trying out a few new ways of doing washes and learning about different top colours for dry brushing. This model pretty much was a testbed for that. And yes, for those curious, sometimes it can take a year or more from building a model to actually getting the video made, if only there was more time in the day. Anyways, time for a final paint. I used Vallejo Matte White, again dry brushed, but this time really lightly to bring out those very fine details and add further contrast on the top of the model. I didn't do this to the whole model, just select areas to give an almost sun-bleached kind of look. The only thing that remains to be done now is to add the base to the model in the little moulded holes, and there we have it, my completed USS Missouri plastic model kit in 1:2000 scale from the works. So, compared to the other ships in the range, which I never bothered to paint, I think that this has turned out okay on the whole. As mentioned, this was a bit of a testbed for different techniques, and being a tiny model, the camera is a bit unflattering up close, but from normal viewing distances, it looks okay. I paid either £2 or £3 for this back when it was in the shops, which I think is a suitable price for it. It is definitely a pocket money type kit. It has about 42 parts, and being quite small and fiddly, it could present a little bit of a challenge in the painting and construction, but generally it's not a bad kit. Is it the most detailed kit in the world? No, not really. For the scale, the plastic parts are a bit clunky, but I think that was unavoidable without the inclusion of photo etch parts, which would push the price up a bit. No decals were in the box either, which, although I'm not sure they were needed, they could have been included for some of the identification markings this ship carried at various points in its life. But again, being so small, not all of them would be particularly noticeable. The kit itself dates from 2003, when it was launched under the EKA or EKA brand, hence the logo on the bottom of the display base. It was reboxed in 2013 by Aoshima as part of their World Navy series. Then finally the version I have here from the works, which dates to around 2018. Sadly, I've not seen these kits in the shops in a very long time, so if you wanted one, the second-hand market is probably the place to go for now. For those of you who aren't in the UK, The Works is a discount book and art shop which sometimes sells kits from other companies like Airfix or Revell at a cheaper price, but this was the first time I'd seen them selling a kit under their own brand, even if it was a rebox. But anyways, I think it's time to wrap this one up here. This is a reasonable kit, which for a low price produces a fair, if tiny, representation of the USS Missouri. Whilst not the most highly detailed kit in the world, it can help provide a bit more experience building kits with small parts and could be completed to the standard I've shown here in only a few hours. Big shout out to my patrons on Patreon and my channel members here on YouTube. Thanks to these guys on screen for the extra support they give my channel. Honourable mention goes to my latest supporter, Kevin, over on Patreon. Welcome to the club. Take a look in the description for more information on how you can get involved. Let me know in the comments what you thought of this build and if you'd be tempted to get a model like this too. Click that like button if you enjoyed this video and the big red one and the bell if you'd like to be notified of any future modelling videos. Like I said, they can take a while from the workbench to the screen, so definitely worth subscribing for anything that might be coming soon. Finally, all that's left to say is a massive thank you to you for watching this, and I will see you on the workbench again next time.